I'm going to take just 5 minutes on Trans Mountain, which has got some... my original slide had this as Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain Pipeline. Kinder Morgan has left the building. They're back in Texas, and they're drinking because they did a good deal. Okay, so let's just crack through this just to explain what this issue is, because I think it's a good issue to break down some of the core policy choices that we face as government and how our voting system can sometimes lead to a break in accountability. Pipelines existed since the early 50s. It moves 300,000 barrels right now of diluted bitumen to the coast. The proposal is to move it to shy of 900,000 barrels down to Burnaby. Increases the number of oil tankers that will sail out of Burnaby sevenfold. 34 or 35 what are called Aframax tankers are the biggest tankers. They're big, real big. And they'll have to dredge under Second Narrows to provide enough space. And it takes diluted bitumen. Everyone know what diluted bitumen is now? Where does it come from? Northern Alberta. It's real quick, bitumen is what we melt out of the oil sands in Northern Alberta. In order to move it through a pipeline, though, you have to dilute it. It's too thick to move. And what we dilute it with is condensate, which is a petroleum product. It's a gas-type product, a kerosene-ish type product. People describe it different ways, but it makes it so that you can move it in a pipeline. The problem with diluted bitumen, well, there's a few. One is that it's a raw resource. It's in its rawest form. Think of round logs versus a 2x4. This is the round log version of oil. There's no added value to it. This is where it goes from just outside of Edmonton all the way down through, and it goes over most of it passes over the existing pipeline, except at the very end here, there's a bunch of route changes around Burnaby, through Burnaby Mountain and a couple of other places. That's the pipeline route, and then it sails out of Vancouver down through southern tip of Victoria and then out. Okay, it just got shot down. So the permits that were issued by the government and signed off by the National Energy Board got shot down on two major things: consultation with Indigenous groups and their decision to exclude tankers from the assessment. So what the NEB, the National Energy Board, said is, we will assess the effects and the impacts of the pipeline up to Burnaby. But once it gets into the tankers, we don't look at it. Well, they did actually look at it. They did do part of their study, but it didn't factor into their decision. And the federal court said, you can't do that. That's stupid. Well, they didn't say stupid. I'm putting that word in. But that's stupid. You got to assess the project and the risks and the benefits of the project. This is the project. It includes tankers. That's what it got shot down on. When Trudeau was asked about this process and this pipeline in 2015, was asked, are you going to keep Harper's environmental assessment process, which had been changed dramatically a few years before in an omnibus bill. You know what an omnibus bill is? It's the kitchen sink stuff. Bill C-38 changed a whole bunch of things about how we review natural resource projects. Trudeau said, yes, we're going to change that law, and we will apply the new process to this pipeline. And then he didn't. Use the same process that had been designed by Bill C-38. That was a problem. And ironically, in those Indigenous consultations, which the government ignored, what was the #1 issue that was raised? The ocean. Tankers. So if the government had actually consulted meaningfully and then done something with it, they would have addressed the tanker issue. Because they didn't do the first step, they lost on both steps. There's irony sometimes in politics. The NEB has had some problems. The government has a new bill in Parliament to get rid of the NEB entirely, create a whole new regulatory environment. But it does not apply to this. The court said Canada was obliged to do more than passively hear and receive the real concerns, and missing was a genuine and sustained effort to pursue meaningful two-way dialogue. So what our officials did is meet with Indigenous people and just write down what they said, but didn't talk like normal people. And also didn't believe that they could affect the way the pipeline was designed based on those consultations, which is not what the law says. So it got shot down. And here we are. Oh, let's, no. The company sold the pipeline to us for $4.5 billion. Kinder Morgan announced its profit on this deal a couple of weeks ago, and they cleared $1.2 billion in profit. And they handed out $1.5 million in executive bonus is our money. Like literally, sometimes in politics we use rhetoric. That's our money. That is actually our money. So they made $1.2 billion off of us. And in the deal, which was finalized 3 weeks before this federal court decision, we actually included a piece of the deal that said, if the pipeline permits get shot down in court, Canada still owns the pipeline. I've never heard of a negotiation done this way, where we say, I will buy this house from you, and if the inspection comes in and says you need to tear it down, I will still buy this house from you. It is maybe one of the dumbest purchases I've ever seen. So we bought a 65-year-old pipeline, and we bought the permits for a new pipeline. $4.5 billion was for the old thing, and the permits to build a new pipeline. Kinder Morgan told us back in the spring, it's a little north of $9.8 billion to build a new one. Current estimates put it between that, $10 and $15 billion for the expanded pipeline. And as the current practice is, the current process is that Canada is going to spend that money. We've started a campaign to say, don't spend that money. If you were going to spend $10 billion, even just on energy in Canada right now, would shipping raw diluted bitumen out of the country be the smartest thing? Would there be other benefits of spending $10 billion on almost anything else? You could do a lot with it. The government is choosing to do this. And one of my fears of this whole scenario is what the business community calls desperate buyer, desperate seller. No one wanted to buy this pipeline. The government tried. No one's really going to want to buy it back from us. It'd be like someone walking into Kelowna today and saying, I need to sell my house today. And you'd say, really? What are the chances they're going to get the best price if they got to close the deal today? Similarly, if somebody walked into Kelowna and said, by end of day today, I need to own a house. No time to negotiate. I just need to buy a house by 4 o'clock. Signed, sealed, and delivered. What are the chances they're going to get the best price? We are in a situation where we're both a desperate seller and we were a desperate buyer. It's a terrible situation to be in. The reason I connect this to what we're talking about before in terms of voting reform is that the government doesn't feel accountable for this stuff right now, in my mind. That there isn't that sense that this is going to have repercussions necessarily. And that's a disturbing thing for a government to feel, because then they feel like decisions are going to come out in whatever way they want. Let's get back to PR just for a second.